Hi, I'm Meteorologist Kelly Greene. Thanks for joining us today for this version of Weather Academy. Today we're talking rain gauges, and this is how you can become a weather observer every day. And with me today is Warning Coordination Meteorologist Sam Lashley from the Indianapolis National Weather Service. Sam, thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
Well, I learned about CoCoRaHS, about the rain gauge, many years ago from you doing a seminar about how to take rain gauge readings. So today we're going to talk about that, go into detail about taking the rain measurements every day, also snow and even hail. So really cool stuff today, Sam.
Yeah, it is. It's a great program for people of all ages, and especially it's a way to get young kids involved in science and technology and mathematics.
I love it. And it's called CoCoRaHS. Why don't you tell us what that stands for and why it's called that?
Yeah, it's kind of a strange name, isn't it? We're all cuckoo for CoCoRaHS, as we like to say. So CoCoRaHS stands for the Community Collaborative Rain, Hail, and Snow Network. So the abbreviation is CoCoRaHS, and the website is CoCoRaHS.org. So it's just a great program where we have citizen science people taking observations using a rain gauge like the one you see behind me here, also taking snowfall measurements, and even like you said, taking hail measurements and then reporting those daily. And it's used by a whole lot of different entities, including your National Weather Service, to help improve warnings and forecasts of weather phenomena.
Great. And I have my rain gauge. This is the one that sits out here behind my deck that I take measurements every single day. And obviously September has been a very dry month, so we haven't had much, but I actually did leave my measurement from this morning in here, and I measured 9/100ths of an inch. And I know, what's the best way to tell them how that you actually take a measurement?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've got my gauge here. And so this is a typical CoCoRaHS rain gauge, which doesn't look like a gauge that most people probably see in the hardware store where they pick up a rain gauge. But this can hold up to 11 inches of rainfall. So hopefully we never see that much here in Indiana. But you can see on the inside, the water has filled up, and we take the lid off and we pull the tube out, and then we can read how much rain is in the rain gauge. So I filled mine up just to show as a demonstration, but I have 45/100ths of an inch in mine. So every morning we ask our observers to go out, they read what's in the rain gauge, then they dump this out, and then they replace it back in their gauge and set it out to record for the next 24 hours. Then they go to a website where they have an account online, and they simply enter that amount every day, and they can add any notes. For example, if there was a lot of wind with the rain, so maybe they didn't catch all the rain that did fall, they can enter information like that. And then that information gets shared on our website. And these observations are taken all across the United States, even Canada, and into the Bahamas. There are networks taking these measurements. So over 20,000 people do this every day.
That really is so impressive that so many people are engaged in it. And I know that a lot of times when we have kids in, it's like, what's the best way to kind of, get your feet wet in the world of weather? And having a rain gauge and being observant every single day is so easy to do. And it's a great way to keep track of what is actually going on in your own backyard. Another thing that I really like is that there is the app that is for CoCoRaHS. I don't know if you can see this very well. Maybe I need to take it back on the sunshine here, which makes it even easier to actually add these measurements every single day. So I don't even have to get on my computer. I could just, as soon as I get it done, I log it in and boom, it's there. And my backyard reading is there. And I can see anybody else. I live in Fishers. I can see who else in Hamilton County had measurements maybe close to mine, or maybe they had a lot more. Do I need to water my grass? I mean, obviously I noticed my water bill. It was very high, but not surprising. We haven't had any rain. But even if we don't get rain, we still report zero amount of rainfall.
Yeah, that's a great point too, because drought is very important, and we are in kind of a low-end drought situation because of the lack of rain over the last month. And our CoCoRaHS observers across the state by reporting zero precipitation every day, we can then look back and see when the last time rain actually did occur at each location across the state. And then that helps a committee that we have every week that goes through and designates how extreme our drought is getting. And we look at these CoCoRaHS reports. So again, it's very important. There's a lot of other entities, insurance adjusters and agencies actually use this data after maybe a big rainfall and flooding event to see how much rain fell in certain areas. And it's just so many groups use it. I can't even begin to tell you the numbers. So it's just an awesome program. And again, for kids, it's a way to make a difference and actually get involved into science. And it's something that you can do. You can compare your measurements with measurements all across the United States and see who's getting rain, who's not getting rain. And teachers can then use the data even in the classroom. So I just can't stress how many opportunities there are to use this data and to get involved and to make a difference.
I know that on the website, that's one of the first things. Why should we report? Why is it so important? And you just named off so many different ways of why it's important to report. And I know that there's been times when maybe I forget. It's not the end of the world if you don't put it in, but it's great. It's super helpful. And being engaged every day helps you understand the weather patterns a little bit and gets to know a little bit more of what's happening in our climate and how things are changing, how the seasons change, and even just on a day-to-day basis where, did we have a quick little spit of rain? Maybe it was a trace amount, or maybe it was an inch of rain, which we do see here in central Indiana.
Yeah, absolutely. We can go back to February 2018. That was an event where 6 to 8 inches of rain fell across different parts of the state and created all kinds of record flooding. CoCoRaHS observers were the critical people that measured that rainfall across the state, and that's how, from the National Weather Service, we knew where to issue flood warnings, flash flood warnings, and that information is just very valuable to us. And prior to CoCoRaHS, we didn't know how much rain was falling in a lot of areas. So it really fills in the gaps for us and gets that critical information to us. And then we can get that information out to the general public and fulfill our mission of protecting lives and property. So we can't do it without the help of all these volunteer weather observers.
Love it. And, obviously from the broadcast meteorology standpoint, we do use these readings as well just to get an idea of where the rain fell or where it didn't fall. But also something that is really, really important is during the winter season here when we get snow. And it's sometimes hit or miss where we can get snow measurements. But CoCoRaHS also brings that part of the measurements in as well. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, so it's really interesting in the wintertime when you get to go out and it's still dark at 7 a.m., the wind's blowing, and you get to take snowfall measurements. That's just the best part of this. But we have a series of instructional videos that show you how to take snowfall measurements. It's not just going out and sticking a ruler in the ground. There's a whole way we do it. So we have some tools that we use. This is called a snowboard, and it's just about a 2-foot by 2-foot wide piece of board that's painted white, and snow will fall and collect on that. And then we take out a snow ruler. So this is what an official snow ruler looks like from the National Weather Service. It's kind of a long ruler with a big handle here. And most people won't have this, but you can just use a regular yardstick or ruler that you might have around the house. But this is made for locations that maybe see upwards of 30 or 40 inches of snow. We're not going to hopefully see that here, but that's why this is made that way. So we go out and we take several measurements in the yard on our snowboard to get how much snow fell. Then we clean that board off every morning and collect the snow for the next morning's measurement. Then again, we can go in on our computer, or we can take our phone right out there and enter that snowfall amount in the app, and we know how much snow fell. Then the final part of snowfall measuring, and this is the really fun part, is we take our rain gauge and it will actually collect snow. So in the wintertime, we take the inner tube and we leave that in the house because that can freeze and break. So our big container sits out and collects snow. Then when we go out in the morning and take that snowfall measurement, we actually bring this inside and we'll melt the snow down, and then we'll measure that into our small tube to see how much liquid content is in that snow. And you might ask, why is that important? Well, you've probably experienced that heavy, wet snow that's difficult to shovel. It's kind of a back-breaking snow. That has a lot of moisture content versus, say, maybe a lighter, fluffy snow or a snow from lake effect snow that you can just brush off with a broom. That doesn't have a lot of liquid content in it. So as scientists, we're trying to measure how much moisture is in that snowpack, and that's the other phase of CoCoRaHS, is getting that measurement as well. And again, you enter that when you enter your snowfall amount right into the app or computer.
All right, I don't have one of your fancy rulers, Sam. I just have a good old-fashioned school ruler. But another important part is that we also measure snow depth. So that is something that is on, if we had snow one day, how much is melted? Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so snowfall is what we're measuring on that board every 24 hours. But snow depth is then what accumulates on the ground every day and continues. So that's the final part of taking those snowfall measurements, is you kind of walk around the yard, the open area, and you take several measurements, and then you average those, and those get rounded up to the nearest half inch. So we're not as specific with snow depth, but that is important along with those amount of moisture that's in the snow, because when that snow does melt, we use that information from our observers to try and determine how much water is going to run off into our streams and rivers, and then if flooding is going to develop because of that. So we can only get that information by knowing how much snow is on the ground, and then our computer models figure out how much of that moisture will go into those rivers and streams and create the potential flooding. So just a lot of useful information that we get out of these observations.
It's so helpful, especially with the snow measurements too. And I have my board. This is a new one. I need to spray paint it, but I also use just some, gas line flags to mark it so I can see where they are. And I have them spread out, in the middle of winter, and they just sit there so that I can take those measurements at any time, which is just so helpful for us to know how much snow actually fell every single day. I know that we also take hail readings, and that is actually another special part of CoCoRaHS too, Sam.
Yeah, so we don't see hail very often, and it's a small part of CoCoRaHS, but it's still an important part of CoCoRaHS. So I want to show you what I have here is a replica of the the United States record hailstone that fell in Vivian, South Dakota in 2010. So to give you a little perspective, I've got one of those small basketballs you use to shoot at the fairs and things. So this hailstone was 8 inches in diameter. And when we measure hail for CoCoRaHS, we want to measure across from the longest axis that we can find. So this one was 8 inches across. And then the circumference, if we measure all the way around the outside of it, this was over 18 inches in circumference. So it still stands as the largest hailstone. Fell on July 23rd, 2010 in Vivian, South Dakota. So that's pretty impressive. So hopefully we will never have to measure this size here in Indiana. But what we're going to see here more often is pea-size hail or quarter-size hail. And when our observers measure that, they can report it immediately through the app or the website, and that information goes right to your National Weather Service. So when our CoCoRaHS observers say we're getting 3/4 of an inch diameter hail, then we know that storm is almost becoming severe. Our severe criteria is 1 inch. That's when we will issue a warning, severe thunderstorm warning for hail. So these CoCoRaHS observers are feeding us that information and allowing us to get those warnings out before that hail gets to a larger size. They also report to us wind and wind damage. Even though that's not technically part of CoCoRaHS, we still encourage those observers to report any kind of weather they're seeing. And that, again, that just promotes that protection of life and property and helps the Weather Service do our job and get those warnings out. So hail, again, a smaller part of CoCoRaHS, but still very important. And we just ask for all kinds of pictures and comments on the types of hail you're seeing. If you look at this hailstone, it was actually made up of several smaller stones. You can kind of see the ridges and the points. This was several stones that actually congealed, melted, and then refroze together. And that's how you get these larger big hailstones. So we really encourage people to take those pictures, send those in so we can examine and see what the hail looks like out there. And again, you can do that right from the CoCoRaHS website or the app.
Well, hopefully they won't have to put a miniature basketball next to it, but a ruler would be good, or a coin if it's, penny size, dime size, quarter size, softball size. All those help in actually kind of determine the actual size for us back in our studio and you guys back at the National Weather Service.
Absolutely, and that is the easiest thing to do. Coins work really well. Apples, fruit, those kind of things. Believe it or not, we do occasionally get softball-sized hail here across Indiana. So I believe that's the largest that we've seen in quite some time. But it's very important that we get that information and get warnings out when the hail's that size, because that's going to do quite a bit of damage. And if people are outside, it can actually cause some significant injuries.
Right. Well, I mean, there's just so many ways that people can get involved. If I have people tell me all the time, I'm kind of a weather geek, I have this app on my phone, or I have this app on my phone. This is just such a great way to actually be interactive and not only learn about the weather, but participating and helping us learn more about the weather. The more information we have, the more we can go off of and understand. How can somebody become a part of CoCoRaHS, Sam?
Yeah, the easiest way is to go to the CoCoRaHS website. Again, CoCoRaHS.org. And right on that website on the left-hand side is a link to getting started. And all you have to do is sign up. You put in your location, your address, and you will get email back once you submit that from the CoCoRaHS headquarters, welcoming you to the program and a little bit more information on what you need to do. So you will need to purchase one of these rain gauges. They are a little expensive initially. They run between $30 and $40, but I've had mine since I started this program in 2008. They're very sturdy, and if you take care of them, they will last a very long time. So it's a good investment. All our observers use the exact same rain gauge. So if you have your own electronic gauge at home, you can still use that for other purposes, but for CoCoRaHS, we want everybody using the exact same rain gauge. And then if you decide you want to do snowfall observing, because you don't have to, but if you do, you would need to get a rain gauge and make sure you have a ruler and a way to measure it. So that's really all there is to getting started. Then you just need to have a good location to install your rain gauge. You want to be away from trees in an open area. But most people can find a suitable location for doing that. And once you have that, you can just start measuring and start reporting.
Right. It's such a great program. Sam, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I just really encourage, people of all ages, for kids and students, get your parents involved, get your grandparents involved. They can help you with the computer and getting the rain gauge installed. So it's a great family project. There are even some schools that do this. So teachers, if you want to get involved, you can send myself an email and we can get you hooked up with some rain gauges, and you can do this and use it for STEM activities and use the data for worksheets and charting and graphing in your classroom. So just a great program for science, engineering, and technology.
Well, Sam, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us. And hopefully everybody
Yes.
goes out there and gets cuckoo for CoCoRaHS.
Cuckoo for CoCoRaHS. Thank you to Sam Lashley, the warning coordination meteorologist with the National Weather Service in Indianapolis. Thanks for attending this Weather Academy. I'm meteorologist Kelly Greene.